at you from the 37th parallel on America's haunted highway. It's Pixelated Paranormal, your guide to the unusual and the strange.
Welcome to Pixelated Paranormal. This is our real first episode here. We did a test show, so we're going to try to roll with this one today. I'm with my two hosts here today, Preston.
Good evening, everybody.
And Sean.
Good evening.
Really? That's
Oh, you better believe it. We're here to wow people.
Wow. You wowed me.
Look at that. One down.
So, you got me with the Barry White voice. My beard is ready.
So, anyway, we're here to talk about different things, but our main story this week is going to be focusing on Mars and some of the history of like maybe possible life on Mars and such. So, but before we get to that, I just wanted to check in on our hosts and see how their weeks have been. Preston, how's your week been?
My week has been phenomenal. Only like a couple days away from going out of town on a quick vacation, so I'm excited about that. And that's all I got.
And Sean, how's your week been, buddy?
It's been pretty good. I'm in the same boat as Preston. I'll be traveling out of town the same weekend, going to Texas to see the Dave Matthews Band. Everybody hold back your excitement. And that's about it.
Yeah. So I apologize. We were supposed to do the episode last Thursday, but due to outside circumstances, it never did happen. So we decided to record it this week. And so far, I'll let everybody know this has been a disaster trying to get this show to record. So hopefully we'll have no more problems, though. So don't laugh, Preston. It could happen. It could happen. So anyway. We wanted to get into some stories here, and we talked very briefly last episode, about something called Missing 411, and this is one of our favorite topics, I'm sure. And I came across some stories in Pennsylvania about dogmen and upright canines, and what makes this interesting is that that is one of the things that keeps being brought up during Missing 411 is there was a little girl that said she was found by a dog person, and there's been a lot of talk about dog people in those stories when they interview people. And I just thought it was interesting because I found this map, and basically it's a map of all the upright canines that have been seen in the Pennsylvania area. And I don't know if anybody else has brought up their map here. But if you look at the map, there's quite a few of them around national forests, and I thought that was pretty compelling information. And if you go to this map, it has individual little dots, and like you got one right in the middle of Allegheny National Park, and it says during the 1990s in general area of Pig Ear and Allegheny National Forest, witnesses says lots of unusual activity in the area as well. And this is like they say it's a dogman group and habitation. Several reports of different types of uprights and bipeds, just all over the middle of Pennsylvania. There's all these stories, and they're all fairly close to a national forest, because it looks like there's lots of national forest in the Pennsylvania area, which makes sense because I mean it was originally known as Penn's Woodland. That is how it got its name. So I thought that was an interesting take on it. These reports go back as early as like the 1800s as well. Loggers were attacked by a group of dogmen. So, I mean, these stories about the missing 411 and people missing in parks, this stuff could have been going on for, well, I mean, obviously they weren't missing from parks, but, they were missing from somewhere. So,
right.
What do you guys have to say about that? Anybody got anything to say about that?
Well, I would like to add, did we go over in the episode 0, did we go over the link that you sent us that had the voice call from the guy that went missing by the river, and there was that weird kind of almost animal-like growl, kind of feral, dog-like.
I don't know if we went over that on the story, or I don't know if we went around over that in the podcast or not. But that was because remember we kept looking for the full audio. We could never find the full audio of that. So yeah, that was. I would tell people to go look that story up about the. I can't remember the guy's name now. I mean, we'd have to go back to the chats. But that was oh my gosh, that gave me chills.
And the reason why I bring that up is there is reports over in India, all the way from back in the the time of when the Romans and the Greeks were in that area, that up in the mountains there was a tribe of dog-like people. So they had humanoid bodies, but very kind of dog-like appearance in their face. They didn't speak any type of known language that could be communicated. A lot of yips and yaps. And a lot of the Greeks and Romans, when they would go in through that area, they would just kind of trade them swords and weapons to kind of keep them away from the villagers. And it is said that they did not interact with people very well. So going back to that recording of that guy who went missing, that feral kind of growl, and the fact that these reports from ancient times where these dog people couldn't communicate, that there might be a link there.
That's very interesting.
The case of the missing man took place in Mounds View. His name was Henry McCabe. McCabe. Right. He was the one who disappeared.
And does it say where that was at in or what state that was in?
Let me see if I can find that.
But
no, it doesn't. It took place Labor Day, September 7th, I think 2000. What was it, 2014? 2014?
But that...
Here with the hard-hitting facts.
Yeah, that was... you guys should look up that video, it's a news story, which is sad because they make it sound like the police released the voicemail, but... They didn't. I could not ever find the entire voicemail.
Here we go. News update. Minnesota. Happened in Minnesota. Right. I believe it was September 2015.
So, and they eventually found this man's body in the water? Was that where they found it?
They found his body, I think, in the river.
Like
in a place where they had already been searching. Like, they have turned that place over several times, only to discover, several days, weeks later, the body was laying there in plain sight, and it would have been nearly impossible to actually not find his body where it was laying. Like, they would have probably literally stepped on it.
Yeah, so that's an interesting story, and like I said, you guys should check that story out and listen to that, because he's calling his wife for help, and then all of a sudden it just turns to these growls and hiss, like, it's just freaky. It really sends chills down your spine. So, but I just wanted to bring that up, and we're going to try to put notes to this podcast as well, so you guys can look at that map and check out the stories. Because like I said, every dot on the map has a story attached to it. So, and they're all over the time period. So, but oh shit, I just closed out everything. Sean,
sir,
what story did you want to hit on?
Well, I've got a little bit of news I just read probably about an hour before we decided to record tonight. I don't know if you guys remember the movie called Flight of the Navigator. It was a movie coming out in the mid-'80s.
Right. I remember that
Number
movie.
one, I think it was pretty awesome, so you may watch it. I really hope it holds up. Most things don't that you watched when we were little, but here's to hoping. Basically, the movie takes place, it starts off in 1978. Little kid goes missing, and then I think he reappears about 8 years later. He hasn't aged, he hasn't changed, he looks just the way he did when he disappeared. When authorities find little kid, they also subsequently find you guessed it, UFO that had crashed into some power lines. So one way or the other, the kid finds his way into UFO. He becomes the full-running expert on piloting UFOs, makes good friends with the AI on the ship, I think voiced by Paul Rubens, Pee Wee Herman. And then he takes a vacation adventure across the cosmos. Anyway, Apparently, the child actor didn't do really much after that movie, and he was just arrested on April 28th in connection of a robbery in Scotiabank. So there you go.
Huh.
Downhill spiral.
Well, I mean, maybe he just needs a UFO and he could fly away. And
Maybe.
But
I found that to be pretty funny. The other bit of news I've got, actually, it was just announced that we, I believe 2 weeks ago, celebrated the 30th anniversary of Chernobyl.
Right.
And for those of you keeping notes, that was on April 26, 1986, when that power plant exploded. And basically what the experts have said is it has been 30 years since the explosion, and it is not safe still. Been 30 years, and it's still a giant mess. People shouldn't go there. They're saying that we still have cows in the area that are still poisoned by radiation. They're producing milk that carries a lot more radiation than technically should be legal or safe for anybody to consume. The mushrooms and the light. Sorry.
And something else that the scientists are saying that they should not be people there and hanging out around in the area still. But even I just learned recently that the Russian government is telling people, no, it's fine. You guys can come back. It's like...
Yeah. The Russian government is saying that the area is pretty safe. The milk is safe to drink, and it's not nearly as bad as people are making it out to be. But yeah, everybody else says it still sucks.
That's crazy. That's so dangerous.
Yeah,
but,
it's pretty ridiculous.
I've always been fascinated with Chernobyl and that area. I remember, being in like the late 90s. What the hell? The late 90s. Oh my God, what is playing on this fucking program? In the late 90s, that there was a woman that would do fast bike rides through the area, and she'd take all kinds of pictures, and I was fascinated with that. She just took pictures of these houses, and she's like, there were literally places that they said the houses were so radiated that if you were to walk into one of those buildings that had the front doors facing Chernobyl, that when it went off, that you would almost instantly die. You'd just be so radioactive when you went in there, because that's where all the radio waves just kind of just are in those houses. And they're just, it's sad when you look at, she'd go into these areas and take pictures, and you'd see kids' dolls and shit just laying around, because everybody just left in a hurry. Their pets got left behind because they were told, it's going to be fine, we're going to be back in a few days, just take what you need. And, it was a mess, and it's just amazing to see that this is a part of the world that time has, the forests and everything have taken it back over. And the trees, some of the trees they said in that story they're yellow from the amount of radiation and stuff that they've absorbed over the years.
Right.
And you were going to continue. Sorry, Sean, I didn't mean to hijack your story.
Oh no, you're good. You're good. To add to the stick about the 90s, they said 10 years after the explosion, the International Atomic Energy Agency, the IAEA, says they estimate the disaster spewed 400 times more radioactivity than the atomic bomb on Hiroshima.
Right.
And then they're saying, 30 years later, the levels of radiation are 10 times higher in the milk in that area of Belarus than the actual nation's food safety limits.
Yeah.
And then meanwhile, like you said, the government says, I think they're okay. It
Yeah.
shouldn't be too bad. You shouldn't be scared to drink milk.
Well, there are people that still live in that area.
Go back to city, it'd be okay. You won't die. This is Russia.
In Russia, milk drink you.
So, but yeah, it's definitely strange to see that they're trying to force people to go back. They're not force people, but telling people it's safe. And I don't know how Russian news organizations work nowadays, but in communist Russia, that was what what they were told is what they had to believe. So it's like there was never any dissenting opinions. So that could have been a dangerous situation.
Right.
So.
And I mean, what's kind of scary too is not only Chernobyl, but recently we had the Fukushima plant explode, and we're kind of in a similar spot there as far as radiation. People are saying, no, we got it cleaned up, it's fine. And then you're finding out that,
yeah,
all the fish population.
Yeah, but the least to say that it didn't explode. It just there was a damage to the nuclear reactor when the earthquake happened. So it wasn't typically the same thing. But have you guys read about the 3 people that actually swam into that radioactive muck to actually shut down the reactor?
No, I knew they did, but I never heard what happened.
Oh my God, they basically, the 3 men are known as national heroes over in Russia because they swam in gear knowing that they were going to die, because if they didn't shut off that reactor by hand, basically, it would have been such a bigger disaster and it would have killed more people.
Oh wow!
So
they did succumb. Then they did pass away.
Oh yeah, they passed away. It was very soon afterwards. I mean, I don't remember, but it seemed like it was. They were so sick they were gone in days, maybe even hours.
Oh man, yeah, really.
So, but that's pretty brave. Preston, you got anything else to add about this?
No.
All right. So I found an interesting article the other day as I was looking over news stories and stuff. I've been going to a website called Phantom and Monsters, which is a real popular site. And I found this story about the mysterious Aboriginal rock art of the Wanginos, which are, of course, in Australia. And if you were to take a look at these paintings and rock arts and stuff, they very much look like greys, our typical greys, the small mouths or no mouths, black eyes, round heads. A lot of them have like halos around their head. And like they have a couple of pictures here, and it's creepy. I mean, and apparently the legends of these 3 tribes that go back to like, what was it said? Like 60,000, not 6,000, like 6,000 years to 10,000 years ago, this tribe is supposed to maybe have existed. But they're still around. Some of them are still around today. There's 3 tribes in particular: the Warara, the Jarinian, which I'm butchering these names, I know.
Nailed it.
And the Wunumbal people are 3 of the Wangito tribes. They said that these creatures were things that they had met, and that their history of creation was based on this stuff. So that kind of goes back to the whole the Anunnaki and stuff like we've heard those creation myths that people were created by the Anunnaki for slaves and stuff. So, I just thought this was an interesting story. And, yes, Preston.
That's also the Anasazi. They had these same myths, but they were called like the ant people. So if you go down to those regions and you look on the actual, like the canyon walls and you see the paintings, the very gray-like beings, they, instead of having the halos, they have like the little rays of light coming off of it, but it's the same thing. They describe these small beings coming down from the stars and teaching them, and that's where they get their creation myths.
That's funny that you mentioned that, because I looked up the Wangito's images, because they only had a couple here and I wanted to see more of them. There are hundreds of these images everywhere, and you know what? They do have some with the rays of light coming off their head, like you just described. So that's pretty interesting. And then some people are like, they were probably owls, and I'm like, I don't know what it is with skeptics and stuff. They always want to bring up the owl because I guess it's the closest thing they can find that looks like a gray alien. And so, it's like, and it's an owl, just like the Kelly Hopkinsville thing. That was one of my annoyances when people were trying to say, oh, well, it was owls. These people lived in rural Kentucky in the 50s, all right? They knew what an owl looked like. They knew the difference between an alien and an owl. There was no way that was ever an owl. So, but I just thought this was an interesting story, and you should probably take a look at these pictures. There are a few that kind of look very owl-like, but there's way more that look like what we typically call the gray aliens. So I thought that was a very interesting story, and I had not heard this. But, I mean, their creation myth goes all the way back to, like, they think 6,000 years at least. Preston, what do you got to say?
And, well, another example of this, too, is if you look at ancient Hebrew traditions, when we talk about the Watchers, right after the giants came down and we had the the giants roaming the earth, there were reports of watchers, and if you look at the ancient drawings, if you can find drawings of these watchers, they actually look like giant graves. You know, like not your small, but your actual big graves with the big bulbous eyes. And so again, it's making that connection.
All right. Well, so Sean, what else have you got for us, buddy?
My thought, I saw that story when it first came out about the cave drawings and whatnot, and everybody's saying, "Oh my God, they're aliens, or the grays, the almond-shaped eyes and the wobbly heads." But you look at them and you see the rays of light and you see the halos, and could they not just be pictures of ghosts? Could that just not be, them celebrating their dead friends and their dead families, and these are just the spirits transcending into the heavens?
I mean, that could be something as well. I mean, we honestly don't know what they are, but their oral tradition. I mean, the people that are still alive from those tribes, their oral tradition seems to pass it down as these are the people that created them. So, I mean, I guess technically, if they are your ancestors and they did create them, but I wouldn't think of it as like that. But I mean, who knows what the real story is? But those are some interesting pictures, and I would definitely look those up.
Right.
So, all right, Sean, got some more stories there for us?
I do. To continue our theme of ancient discoveries, there's a story I've always liked ever since I think I read it in high school. A friend of mine turned me on to it, and it's the story of Pedro the Mystery Being, also known as Pedro the Mystery Mummy. It starts off, we'll take you back to the year of 1934. We're in Wyoming in the Pedro Mountains. You've got these two prospectors who are basically digging for gold. Their names were Cecil Maine, and the other man's name was Carr. I forget his first name, but Maine and Carr, like I said before, they were digging for gold, and they came across a pretty healthy vein, which for those of you who don't know, a vein basically is just a big deposit. And they began to dig, getting the gold ore out, and decided this is taking too long. Why don't we just blow it up with dynamite and save ourselves a ton of time? So after they blew apart the cave, once they blew apart the side of the mountain, they discovered a cave. I think the cave, they say, was about 15 foot wide by about 4 foot tall. Thinking they had probably just stumbled upon a great big treasure or deposit of gold. Once they entered the cave after the debris had settled, they found out that there was actually nothing inside, but basically nothing. It was empty, except for a small ledge where they discovered what they described as mummy of a creature when sitting down was only 7 inches tall. Later on, they discovered through measuring the skeleton, it was probably about 14 inches tall. And what they described is it looked like a tiny little man, only his head had been smashed or flattened across the top. He had very wide-set eyes, a very broad nose. The difference between a human skeleton and Pedro's skeleton was that he had very pronounced canines and very sharp teeth. So once they discovered this, experts are saying either they thought, number one, this could be a new creature or a new race, or number two, forget the gold, we just discovered this mummy, we're going to make a ton of money. So they took it into town, I think it was Casper, Wyoming, and started showing the authorities. So fast forwarding a bit, they had a bunch of experts, anthropologists come in, and many people believed it was a hoax, that these guys had either found a deformed baby skeleton or done some taxidermy, or basically faked the skeleton of this creature. What is interesting is through different x-rays, carbon dating, they discovered that it indeed was real, and they had not faked it. What was strange about the creature, though, is being that it was sealed away in a cave, they don't know how long it had been there or how really it would have been sealed in this cave, judging by how thick the rock wall was. But besides the body being dried out, it actually had a gelatinous substance across the top of the head. Later on, they revealed that it looked like it was brain matter and congealed blood. So they had a lot of people look at it. They never really tried to cash in too much on it at first. Later on, reports say they did sell it. And the problem with this story is I find it really interesting. It's fun to read. But of course, the water gets a bit muddied. It says that the creature itself, the skeleton, has changed hands between different owners. I believe at one point there was a man who owned a drugstore called the Jones Drug Store in Wyoming. Let me see if I can find the name of the drug store. It was in Meeteetse, Wyoming, called Jones Drug Store. What gives this story a bit of credibility is there are affidavits that were signed and dated. There are photos of different people, credible sources, respected people in the community, holding the skeleton. It was basically kind of traded back and forth for monetary value. I think, if I remember right, they may have made about $1,000 when they sold the skeleton mummy the first time. But then, after that, like I said, it gets a bit muddied. It was in a drugstore for a while on display inside a yellow dome. Later on, it was traded to a businessman who traveled to New York and lost after the guy actually took it to New York. Nobody really knows where it's at. There are rumors that it was in the Chicago Field Museum for a while, although there's no actual documentation of it. Different magazines and newspapers have contacted the Field Museum in Chicago. They don't have any record of it. And it was also rumored that it was a traveling sideshow. Part of a traveling sideshow for quite a while, too. But yeah, it's been one of my favorite stories for a long time. They've done a couple documentaries about it, and what I found out also is the story is so popular, now take that with a grain of salt, that Unsolved Mysteries actually had an episode dedicated to Pedro the Mystery Being.
I vaguely remember that story when you talked about the cave and stuff like that. So that's very interesting.
And you said that was that took place in Wyoming?
In Wyoming. The date, I find half a dozen places that say it was 1944, half a dozen say that it's 1992.
I think we're losing Sean.
Oh no. Most cases say it was in June. A couple of cases say it was in October, but
I think the Wyoming thing is actually really interesting because back in the 20s and 30s and a little bit before that, there were reports that people... So here we got a case of a very small mummified body that's kind of odd and that we're digging up. There were actually a lot of reports of people finding very large bodies, almost like giant size, like 10, 9 foot tall mummified bodies, and they would actually end up, a lot of times, they would end up in the windows of shop owners. So like the local drugstore guy would actually have this giant mummy with a sign that says, come up, pay 5 cents and see my mummy. And
right, exactly.
Bring people into the store. And, there's always been this big conspiracy that the Smithsonian would go in there and take the bodies and cover them up. And actually, they've done a lot of research. Independent groups have done a lot of research over the last several years and come to find out that the Smithsonian actually would go in and, grab these mummified bodies to actually save them, catalog them, and then, in their giant warehouse of crap, if you take the time, you can go find the giant mummies that were in, Bob's Country drugstore.
Right. The history they think that they've discovered about this creature, and in keeping up and mispronouncing Native American and ancient civilizations, people say most likely it was part of this Native American folklore known as the tiny people, or little sprites, as they called them, the Naimarigas. They were legends saying that these little guys were about a foot tall, maybe a foot and a half tall, would keep to themselves, but if anybody encroached on their territory, they were chased off by tiny bows and arrows and tiny poison darts.
Sounds like little pygmies then.
Pretty much. That's kind of what it sounds like to me too, but there we go.
But I thought I read somewhere in that story earlier too. Oh, no, that may have been the other story. Never mind. I'm getting two stories confused. Your other story is where I was thinking of.
Well, has anybody got anything else to go on before that, or should I just jump right in?
No, you should jump right on in, and then we'll get to the Mars stuff after that.
All right. So, with all these things, we talk about paranormal, we talk about ghosts and aliens and why we like it. I'm a pretty firm believer in all these things, but my only problem is, if someone's going to tell me a story, I want to know 100% it's real. While I love to read these stories, I also like to read stories that are proved wrong, just because I think that's a good way for people to kind of hold true to their beliefs that probably 99% of these stories are fake, while 1% could be true. So, a couple days ago, my wife and I were watching the TV show. I talk about it a lot. I'll probably talk about it even more as the episodes come. On Sci-Fi, there was this really awesome show called Fact or Faked. And there was a story featuring a man named Jonathan Reed, or actually, as he says, Dr. Jonathan Reed, who is supposedly a psychologist. Dr. Reed one day was going through the forest in the woods nearby in Washington, next to Snoqualmie Pass in Washington. The day was October 15th, 1996. What Dr. Reed says happened is as he was walking through the forest with his dog, the dog took off, broke the leash, and chased after what he originally thought was going to be a small animal. So, basically chasing down after his dog, he came around the corner and discovered his dog tangled up with this creature, as he describes it, being about 4 foot tall, very thin, wearing stark black clothing, very spindly creature with a gray head. He describes it as kind of being your classic gray alien, slit for the mouth, oval almond-shaped eyes. He said as he walked up across the fight that was ensuing, he had grabbed a large tree branch, not knowing if what he would walk up was his dog tearing up a rabbit, or maybe his dog was being attacked by a bear. So out of sheer desperation, he charged the animal, and as he charged it, he noticed that the creature supposedly had his dog picked up by the mouth, one hand on each part of the jaw. As he raised his arm to hit this creature with the branch, supposedly this gray ripped the dog in half, basically grabbed his mouth, split him in two, pulls out the spine, and then as the dog falls to the ground, he turned into a pile of ash, the dog did. So, as anybody else would, he clubbed the creature with a stick. Now, I like that story. I thought it was pretty awesome. He even has a video to go along with the story. The video shows him basically panting, falling down. It's kind of a POV point of view. He rushes the creature, hits it over the head of the branch, and then proceeds to puke quite a bit. He's huffing and puffing.
I didn't see this video.
Yeah, I've got to find it. The story is really great, but what's great about that TV show is basically they try to find these stories they think could be credible and then try to prove them wrong. So the video, of course, like everything else, is very shaky. It's very blurry. You see this creature laying down in a huddled mess, bleeding from the back of its head. He's screaming, the man screaming, crying. And then he turns his attention over behind him where you see this kind of diamond-shaped craft floating on the forest floor, not really moving, just floating stationary. So the story proceeds a little bit longer. There's a second video. Apparently he went and got his truck, grabbed the creature's body, threw it in the back of the truck, and took it home. That, I think, if I found an alien, I'd probably do the same thing. That way I could prove that I wasn't a psychotic mess, and I really did find something. So he's got a second, what you might call, homemade autopsy video, where he unwraps the plastic that he wrapped the creature in. It shows the creature blink a few times, move its head. Then the video fades to black. Reportedly, the first story he told was that he threw the creature into his storage freezer, not knowing if it was alive or dead, and then either A, he called the police, then fell asleep, or B, fell asleep and then called the police. After that, the way the man is kind of proved to be a hoaxer is the story then goes in two separate directions. The first story is that he called the police show up, men in black, so to speak, wrap up the body, leave, and then say, hey, by the way, you never saw anything. The other story that he continued on with later on, I should say he changed the story to, is that he put the creature in the freezer, fell asleep, woke back up, went to check on the creature, then feeling bad about beating up the supposed alien, opened up the freezer, and the creature was gone. There's a trail of blood, and he never saw the creature again. So that's what's pretty interesting.
So in fact or fiction, did they definitely say it was fiction, or did they?
What I dig about that show is the fact that they go to not quite extremes, but they're very scientific and very professional. They found that they believed his video was fake. They were able to, right? Yeah, there we go. I already gave that away earlier. They were able to make a video just as good, just as blurry as this man's video. They sit down, do a one-on-one discussion, and then kind of like I mentioned before in our last episode with Bill Clinton, they do kind of a voice analysis and find out that through the lie detector that his voice was too shaky, too broken up, he wasn't really maintaining the same heartbeat. And they basically told him face-to-face on the episode, we believe that you're lying, and this story is not accurate. So that was what was pretty nice. They did find out as well that that's not even really his real name. He goes by Dr. Reed. And in actuality, his name, I had here, I'll continue to look for that while I'm talking. He actually doesn't have a college degree. He never went to college and finished anything, nor does he have any doctorates. So that's what kind of seems to be really funny. His true name was John Bradley Rutter, is what he apparently is reported to be known as. The crazy thing, like a lot of these cases, is he's gone off to write a book like everybody else does. You can go on Amazon to find it. It's called Link, L-I-N-K, an extraterrestrial odyssey. It's on Kindle. You can read it. It's got like 5-star ratings. People say it's one of the best books they've ever read. He has nothing but 5-star ratings, actually. Throughout the years they've interviewed him, he's been on Coast to Coast about 7 times. So I mean, there's kind of a red flag. No, Coast to Coast is great, but if you've been on there about 7 times, you're probably trying to milk some kind of cash out there.
Yeah.
So.
Although David Paulides from Missing 411's been on there more than anybody I've ever seen, and
touche. Good point.
But I believe everything that guy says. Well, I mean, I guess not everything, but
Right.
I believe something's there. So, wow! But I'd never heard that story before. When did that take place?
It says here it all started back... Well, see, I'm getting 2 dates. I see here November 11th, 1998. But if we jump over to, good old Wikipedia, October 15th, 1996.
Well, see, and that's pretty weird. That you got to think back in those 2 time periods, we didn't have cell phone cameras and stuff like that. So he would have actually had to been carrying a camera around if he were to run into why would you have a video camera to walk your dog? That just seems odd to me. And then suddenly your dog's going to get in a tangle with an alien and suddenly you're there to capture it. That just spells hoax to me.
Exactly.
Nowadays, if that were to happen, you could say, well, we all carry cameras with us 24/7, so, and yet we still don't catch anything like that. That seems very fishy to me as well.
Right,
so,
right.
Also, the flip side to it is with our technology now, it's so easy to snap a photo of anything, go in and just Photoshop the crap out of it, and before you know it, you have this amazing looking photo that you can pass off as being the real deal, where, back in like the 50s, 60s, and 70s, maybe a really good photo could be considered tangible evidence for, whatever it is that you're looking at. Like this, the photo could be really good evidence for Bigfoot, but now a photo is basically nothing. I mean, it's just a photo.
Right.
If we want evidence of the paranormal when it comes to like aliens, Bigfoot, and things like that, like we need the meat and potatoes. We need, an actual alien body that we can scientifically study. And so a lot of times they're just videos. It's next thing, moving on.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, we think about it though. When you got something like the Patterson-Gimli Bigfoot video that's been around for years, and we're still trying to analyze that. We're still trying to figure out what happened there. I mean, we're almost guaranteed now that that's a hoax, but, there's still people that they'll defend that video right down to the fact, they'll go out to the area and find the tree branches that were broken when the creature passed through that area. So, people are like, well, why would somebody spend that much money to make a suit like that or buy a suit like that and make that video? So, I mean, in the 90s, that practical effects, people would have done that. You could get rubber suits and alien suits, and if you were making the video blurry enough, you could probably get that to pass that off. I mean, there was those videos of that alien that they supposedly had at Area 51, and I can't remember what his name was. They had a weird name for it. And it was screaming and stuff, and it looked pretty real for like the 90s. Now you look at it and you're like, oh, well, whatever, that looks like fake as shit.
Right.
In the alien autopsy videos, Fox did a whole hour-long episode on that, and that was obviously fake. So, but, it's still an interesting story. I never heard it before, and it's kind of, if you don't believe it, I don't really believe that, but it's still an interesting story nonetheless.
Right, right. It was one of those stories where the episode starts up. I was in the bathroom putting my contacts in. Shayla was in the kitchen cooking, and I heard the voiceover of the guy screaming, and then, of course, the reactions of the people on the TV show saying, oh, my God, it's crazy. So, of course, like everything else, I said, oh, God, get in here, watch this, rewind it. And, I mean, edge of my seat, so excited. I heard the story. I thought, man, this is incredible. It's a really good video. And then, of course, the TV show just takes it apart piece by piece, so... Let that be your lesson. It needs to be, don't make a video if it's not real.
All right. Well, Preston, you've been awful quiet. You got anything else to say about this story?
No, that whatever I just said a couple seconds ago, that was my 2 cents.
All right. Well, Preston's been pretty quiet because he had a lot of stuff he wanted to talk about here about Mars and stuff. So we're going to let him take over for a bit here, and we're going to discuss what's going on Mars.
So when are we going to fit in your story? Because you have a story about Mars too.
We'll
right?
fit it in with yours. So just go ahead and.
Okay. Well, so Mars is a massive topic to tackle because there's so much information out there about it, and it stretches over, from as early as 1976 all the way up to now. If we really want to start off at the very beginning, we have to look at the original CIA astral projection projects, where they were, using people to astral project to different locations.
You mean the remote viewing, right? Not the astral.
Yeah, remote viewing.
Yeah. Major Ed Dames was probably a part of that, right? Is that, if I'm correct?
Correct, yeah. And so there are reports that they would give the remote viewers these targets, and when they would view the landscape and they would write out the details, that what they were remote viewing in the early days was actually Mars. And so even before we get to 1976, where we actually have Viking 1, the orbiter, NASA knew ahead of time what was up there, and that's where we start to get all these photographs. 1976 is where this all starts off with NASA, and we have the Viking 1 space orbiter, which had the mission of orbiting Mars for a long period of time, taking over 2,000 photos, with the idea that by the time Viking 2 got up there, they would know where the best place to set this puppy down was. And as the first photos start to come in, we get this what looks like a face, very Egyptian-like, King Tut mask-looking thing, and the news headline was, aliens on Mars, life on Mars, and, once NASA released that, it was kind of like a oh shit moment, like maybe we shouldn't have done that. And then they start to release, a press conference that it's not a face, that's nothing, it's just a trick of light. It's the way the light's bouncing off the hills and things around it, and it's creating a shadow. And so from that moment on, we have two realms of possibilities, or we have two camps of thoughts. We have the people that are like, it's just a rock, don't worry about it, and then we start to get all those people that are like, no, this was created by intelligent design. There are aliens on Mars, or we're aliens on Mars, so this is proof that aliens exist. And then it just starts to go from there. One of the proprietors to the whole idea that there's actually life on Mars was Richard C. Hoagland, who was a NASA correspondent for CBS. And he wrote Monuments to Mars, and then that 3-hour video that you complained about earlier that I posted too late, Dark Mission.
He's also been a guest on Coast to Coast. I don't know how many times. He's
on there all the time,
and that dude, I don't, you can say what you want to about his story. I get the feeling that dude believes everything that he says he does.
Yeah. But, with Richard Hoagland, we're going to get off topic here for just a second. With Hoagland, 1980s Hoagland is top notch. This guy knew his shit. And, 2000 and whatever, 15 Hoagland is batshit crazy. Just give it up, dude. You're past your prime. Give the torch to somebody else, because he's just rehashing all these old ideas and just adding to it. And now it's just, you listen to it and you're like, this is complete bullshit. Let's just move on. We're done. But
to get back to the face on Mars, I do have a question. I want to know what you guys think about this as well, since it's a famous picture. I'm sure everybody that's listening to it has seen this picture of the face on Mars. Now, what do you think would have been the purpose to have this monument on Mars? Do you think it was, because number one, a lot of times when we have monuments, they don't face directly upwards to the sky. So, do you think possibly it was some group, maybe, if it's real, if it's not just a rock formation and shadows, do you think somebody expected us to have powerful telescopes to one day see that, to let them know that they were here, or what do you think about that?
Well, that's a possibility, and also you can look at it as, okay, the Nazca lines, in Peru, why did why did they build the monkey or the spider? I mean, from the ground level, you can't see the monkey or you can't see the spider. You can only see those when you're, in an airplane or really high up. For the longest time, you have the ancient astronaut theorists that are like, oh, it's because, they were building it for the aliens, so the aliens knew where to land. And, 2 or 3 years ago, we get a study showing that the shaman said, no, this is because, we would take ayahuasca or mushrooms and get high off our butts, and then we would float above the earth and astral project, and that was our way of saying, oh, this is where I need to put my body back down.
So
it could be, let's say that they're an ancient civilization that maybe, it's for religious purposes, or maybe you're right, Rob. They one day thought these idiots are going to come back here and we're going to say, hey, buddy, here we are.
I like the idea better that the Martians were high as fuck and they're like, yo, man, I got this idea, bro. We're going to build this face on our planet, and like, dude, whoa. Anyway, whoa. Sean, what do you got, buddy?
I was going to ask, in the Cydonia region on Mars where that face is found, were there ever any other photos that came forth of the same formation from other light sources?
Well, Richard C. Hoagland's had two different pictures that he had seen from 2 different times, like 4 months apart. And he said it still had the same thing, but then other people are still saying, no, that's not true.
No, there's actually several people dug through the archives of NASA, and so it was 4 or 5 months apart. So the first one, let's say, was pre-dawn. And the second photo they saw was 5 o'clock p.m. Martian time. So there was a wide range of the angle of the sun between these 2 photos, and if it was just light playing on shadow, it should have disappeared, and it didn't. Now, where the photos start to change is in 2003 when we went back up there, and the first images we got back were really dusty, really hazy. It basically looked like it's dubbed the litter box because it basically looks like a weird cat-shaped litter box that's just shitty, and everybody.
So it's a square.
It's more square. It's lumpy looking. It looks nothing like a face, and everybody was extremely disappointed in this. And then, that's when the whole NASA cover-up started going on. But then, the ESA, so the ESA went up there, which is the European Space Agency, and they used a different type of low orbit angled camera. Mm-hmm. And the pictures that they sent back, you still start to see facial features on there. You can still see almost like an eye socket. You can kind of see where the mouth would have been at one point in time, maybe a little bit weathered away. But the interesting thing about when the ESA went up there is the camera that they used also picked up on the reflectivity of the objects, so that they could see kind of how whatever, this rock is made from this rock is made from that. And at the time that they took this photo, it was early dawn, so early Martian sunlight, and this face was so reflective that you could pick up little to no detail on it. And it begs the question, well, we really don't have anything as far as natural formations go here on Earth that reflect that much light. You can go anywhere you want. You can go to the desert, Arizona. You can look at all these different rocks. There's nothing here on Earth that we know, a natural material that will reflect that much light. And so, what is it? How can this Martian, if we're basically, the structure of Earth and Mars is basically about the same, then, common sense would tell you that if we don't have any rocks that can reflect that much light, then they shouldn't have any natural rocks up there that reflect that much light. And so Hoagland and that whole camp, would tell you that, it's a metal structure, it maybe have glass on it, and they just kind of go downhill from there.
Yeah, and you got to think too, since it's built into a mountain and stuff like that, if everything else is wiped away, just like on Earth, if you wiped away entire civilization, how long would it be before Mount Rushmore disappeared, right? And you got to think that's not going to be something that just happens overnight. Mm-hmm. I mean, that thing's going to be there for hundreds of years, I would think.
And another interesting thing is shortly when they discovered the D&M pyramid, so now we have this hexagonal 5-sided pyramid, the government was starting to use computers to, over in Russia or in the desert, let's say that we're using satellites to fly over, and we were flying over and we're taking pictures of the terrain below us. they were developing software that could analyze whatever it was that was down there and tell you, okay, this is a tank being covered up, this is, an army base being covered up, or it's just a rock. And so to test it out, they used the photos of the Cydonia complex in Mars, and almost every object, as far as like the five-sided pyramid went or the face went, when they ran it through the program, it actually came back saying that it was artificially made, that it wasn't a natural, structure. And 5 months later, they implemented this program into the U.S. military, and that's what we used when we were in, Desert Storm to figure out if they were covering up tanks. They tested it out on Mars and said, no, the face is an actual structure, or the pyramid's an actual structure. So, who knows?
Interesting.
And then, so besides Hoagland, Hoagland's really, the forefront of the whole Mars thing and life being on Mars. Over the years, he's teamed up with Mike Barra, who's wrote 2 books, Ancient Life on Mars 1 and Volume 2, and he really broke it down into all these different rock formations or all these different artifacts. So if you check out those books, you'll start to see photos of rocks that look like lizards, more structures. He's dubbed things like the fort. I don't know if you guys look at your phone real quick.
I looked at it.
A bunch of photos that I sent you.
That stuff looks all funky and weird. I don't believe a lot of that.
So we see all these weird rock formations, and he gives them like the airport, the fort, and he really starts to break it down and really tries to push that. I don't know. I don't know if I take his angle on it or not. Dr. John Brandenburg wrote in a scientific journal a couple years ago that if you measure the amount of Xeno 129 molecules in the atmosphere, that there's a high level of those in the atmosphere, and that's prior to a nuclear war. And then you have as many studies that say they're naturally caused, you're full of shit. One of the ones that I actually found really interesting was Dr. Rita Louise. She wrote a book about looking at the mythos, so looking at our myths throughout history, and then being able to pull things from them. And so we talk about the Anunnakis, and the Anunnakis, they came here to Earth to mine gold.
Right.
So if that was real, if there's really something to that, then we should be able to go back and we should be able to find all these gold mines, and they should be really, really old. So she's doing all this research, Sean.
Oh, I was going to say, so if the Anunnakis were searching for gold, can we definitively say Pedro the Mystery Mummy was an Anunnaki? I think case closed. We've solved her.
Case closed. Stamp it. Boom.
All right, I think that's it for the show. So I think we've solved all the mysteries.
Podcast over. Wrap it up. So she started to look historically if there's any records of gold mines and how old they were, and you don't start to find too many gold mines past a certain date. So we look, in the Bronze Age or wherever we actually start mining these materials is where you find the most. So in ancient times there was very low numbers of gold mines, but what she did find were there were very high numbers of ochre mines. So the ochre, the element being mine,
not Shrek.
Not Shrek.
Not Shrek.
Okay.
She found a lot of evidence for those those mines popping up all over the place, and it was said that the gods covered their body in the ochre and it protected them. And when she looked at Mars and was doing research on Mars, all the data that they got back from all the rovers and things like that show that Mars actually has a large amount of ochre on it right now. And to be able to have ochre, you have to have water, you have to have algae, you have to have iron, and all those things combined together eventually create this mineral or this substance.
Well, NASA just came out this week saying that they found oxygenated levels in Mars. And
right.
So...
And it was really in one of those articles that I posted, and I didn't know this, so I kind of learned something new about all of this, is that, was it the 90s that they started to come out and they were saying that they found, microbial life on Mars, and it was, a big deal. 1976, when they actually put up Viking 2, NASA came across life forms then. They actually found little microorganisms, but they weren't sure, so they kept the rover going, and when they decided to go ahead and turn that beast around and go back, they had damaged the samples and had nothing to go off of, so they're like, we'll just write it off. And so in 1976, we had actually found, early evidence to bring, microbial life.
And not only that, they
ESA
even talked about finding water and stuff as well.
Yeah, yeah, and the ESA, when they went in 2004, they sent back pictures of these craters. So they were doing the same thing. They would have the orbit go across, and they would take photos and photos and photos. And so they had these craters, and they go back during the springtime, and you see this, almost like vegetation. It's kind of green spots all over the place. And then as it gets close to fall, it starts to die back, and then when they go around again during the winter months, it's nothing, and then you start to get back into spring and summer, and so you see this vegetation grow and die, grow and die. So even the ESA has shown that there's possible plant life there on Mars, and I also posted a link that I thought was really interesting, that when the Russians went up there in the 80s, they lost a probe on Phobos. They were getting close to one of the moons on Mars, and when they zoomed in on the camera, they saw this white monolith, a very tall white monolith sticking out of a crater. There was a white flash. Lost probe was gone. So, Russians made contact.
Yeah, I looked at those videos or that picture, and I'm like, really? That doesn't look like much of nothing. But
We lost probe.
But, do you have anything else there, Preston?
I'd like to point out that, a lot of this, a lot of the information, now, I think what Hoagland put out in the very beginning is very viable information. I think that if you read that and look at it, he makes a really good argument. But so many people now are jumping on this bandwagon that it's become oversaturated. So the more we look at these images, the more we're just filled full of pareidolia. You see a picture and they're like, this is a glyph of a parrot on the side of a Martian cliff. It's a fucking rock. Get over it. It's not a parrot. Okay, this one rock is not a lizard. It's a rock. You go back and you look at that earlier data. They really did a good job of breaking it down to make a solid case. And now it's just like, this rock's an alien head. No, it's not. It's a rock. Leave it alone. Sean?
For our listeners who are not psychologists, pareidolia is the phenomenon involving stimuluses, being pictures or sounds, where your mind perceives familiar patterns, i.e., you see a giant fuzzy rock on Mars, you think it's a face. The more you know.
The more you know.
And we've also talked about that before because of the Aztec mask they found on Mars and stuff, so... But
now that one guy that I did post a link to, his crab, I think is pretty solid right there. I think that his crab photo really does look like there's a crab running around Mars right now. You heard it here first, folks. There's crabs on Mars.
Well, of course there's crabs on Mars, and there's also other things on Mars because the U.S. military actually has a base on Mars. And if this story is to be believed, there's video proof. For 4 minutes, you can watch this video that we'll hopefully have tagged in the story notes of somebody saying, "Hey, we found right here a decapitated human soldier," and it's hard to see because it's not a rock. And when you look closer to it, if you change the contrast and add some artistic license to it, it looks like It does not look like a kombucha tea bottle. That's
You're a liar
for
and
sure.
a thief.
But it looks like a soldier's helmet, and another picture shows a gun, and another picture shows a tank. And if you look at these artistic licensed diagrams, it sure does artistic interpretations. Let me tell you, I believe it. We have a military base on Mars, and that Mars rover is going to come across it, and it's going to be like, what? I don't know what's going on here. And then
Now, Robert, Ronald Reagan's granddaughter. Several years ago came out and said that her family has knowledge.
She was in this video. She was in this video.
It's been there since the 70s, and we have this time warp ability transporter.
And I don't think it was Ronald Reagan's daughter. It was Eisenhower's granddaughter.
Eisenhower.
Boom. So it's Eisenhower. So she can't be lying. They wouldn't lie to us.
That's right. Got a new deal and everything.
She's an Eisenhower baby. They tell the truth.
So, but she seems batshit insane too. But You hear her talk about it. I would definitely recommend looking at this video.
Susan Eisenhower.
Is that who it is?
Boom.
Yeah.
Yes.
Sorry, family to Ronald Reagan. I didn't mean anything by that.
That's the first lawsuit. Way to go.
So I think that's pretty much it, right? Is that all we got to talk about?
Yeah.
So we should get our. We hope you guys enjoyed this show. Oh shit! I lost the phone number.
Oh my
Everybody,
gosh.
Preston, you can do your.
Plugs,
and I will try to find that number.
Well, so every week or every other week in between when we do our podcast, we're going to have a teaser video up. So pay attention to Facebook for the teaser videos. It'll give you kind of an idea of what we're going to do. I think that's it, really. You know, once we get up on iTunes, we're actually on there. Rate us, because that's going to help us, you know, get us out there, more people, and leave nice reviews. You know, tell us how good we are and stroke our egos. And that's about it. That's all I got, really.
All right, Sean, did you want to plug anything?
Yes, we now have an email. It is pixelatedparanormal@gmail.com. If you've got stories that you saw in the news, personal anecdotes, shoot them our way. We'll take a look at them and maybe read them over the airwaves.
All right. And our number is 707-520-4263. That's 707-520-4263. Like our Facebook page, join that, and you'll keep up to date on what we've got going on. Also, I think our number is posted there. Oh shit. Also, I forgot to hit the button to make the thing continue to record for Amalto, so hopefully that doesn't fuck anything up too bad. If we can't get the other thing recorded. Anyway, so 707-520-4263. Sorry, Preston, what?
Are we going to end this bad boy on a personal anecdote like we did last time?
Hold on, let me get the plugs in, and we'll let somebody do their personal whatever. Our fucking story. Our story. Also, I want to plug Pixelated Radio. It's my original podcast with Mark, Corey, and Rich. Also, Rich's podcast, Sports Car Unleashed, if you're into sports car racing and such. And Mark's own personal podcast, Pixelated Sausage Podcast, or some shit like that, where he rambles on for a long time, sort of like I'm doing now. Preston, do you have a personal story that you would like to share?
I mean, I have a million.
It's a tall order. It's a tall order to fill. 1 million stories.
It's a tall order to fill.
Well, you just pick one. It's all up to you, buddy.
You got to keep them coming back. Make it a good one.
What do you want? Like,
oh my God,
shadow people encounters? Do you want ghost hunting stories?
No,
I don't have any good UFOs because I have never seen
let's
UFOs.
Let's get us a ghost hunting story in here, because we are a paranormal podcast and we've really yet to hit too much on ghosts. So
I got a decent ghost hunting one. Now, over by where I work, there's a cemetery, and it has a mausoleum, and it's one of the few mausoleums that are actually open on a daily basis. So from 9 to 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., you can walk inside this thing, you know, visit the dead, you know, pay your respects, and you can leave. And I went in there one afternoon, and when you walk in it, there is, you know, some pews and an altar, and when you get past that, there are some chairs and tables that you can sit at. And so I sat down at one of the chairs, and I turned on my recorder and got my ghost box up and running, my PBS7. And it's, you know, all staticky. And I say, you know, if anybody's here and you wish to communicate with me, very clearly, very loudly, use all of your energy, and can you tell me what it's like on the other side? And this thing is just for minutes, nothing. And kind of right toward the end, I hear this, and I'm like, okay, that's something. So I go home and I run it through the audio program and try to clean it up a little bit, see if I can get anything, and I can't make shit out of it. And I'm just like, oh man, that's really disappointing. I'm gonna go back though. I'm gonna give this another try. And I walk in and I sit down, exact same spot, get everything up and running, and start the recording again and say, okay, guys, I was here like a couple days ago. I asked the question, is there anything, what can you tell me about what it's like on the other side? What is it like in the afterlife? And all of a sudden you hear, and it just keeps going like that for like 5 minutes. And I'm just like, God, I'm so mad right now. I'm like, I wasted my time. I'm not getting shit. And I start to get up, and as loud, just like a boom. It was like, Bible! Just really loud. This male voice just screamed, Bible. And I'm like, start to get the chills. Like, well, I guess, when I ask what is it like on the other side, Bible, it's kind of a generic answer. It makes sense, I guess. And so I start to be like, I just got to get out of here. And so I start to get up, and I start to walk out, and I walk past the altar, and I get this really goosebumpy, chilly sensation, and I notice that there is a Bible open on the altar, and I'm like, it can't be this easy, can't be this simple. I'm like, just keep going, don't go back, don't go look. And so I turn around, and I go up to the Bible, and I start to read on the first page, don't see anything, get to the second page, and it starts to talk about the city of Zion, and how the city of Zion is, streets are paved with gold, and it's like the promised land when we all, hit eternity, and blah, blah, blah. I'm just kind of like, well, I did ask what it was like on the other side, and you did give me an answer. Thank you. And then I just got the fuck out of there.
Interesting. Very interesting. So, anyway, I think that's going to be the end.
That's my personal story. Thanks for listening.
Okay, guys. Everybody say good night.
Good night.
Good night.